everyone. Hi, welcome to the next episode in the Zenskar webinar series. Today we have three very highly accomplished guests with us to talk about a topic that so many of you have requested more insights on. I'll very quickly introduce them in alphabetical order. So I'll start with Apurva. Apurva has, been a CFO at multiple different software companies. Currently, he, is doing a multiple different things. He's a venture partner. He's a CFO at a few different companies. He advises a few software companies. So he brings with him a wealth of experience. Next, I'll go to Emily. Emily is the VP of Finance and Operations at Avoma, and before that, she has significant experience leading finance teams at various other different companies. Rahul is the CFO at Carbine, based in New York. He also has significant experience in the SaaS industry, and he's been leading finance teams in the software vertical for quite some time now. And they're all here to talk about a topic that is close to all of your hearts, which is how to kind of think about tooling for the finance function. You of course know Saurabh and me. Saurabh and me are the founders of Zenskar. Uh, so I'll, without wasting much time, I'll just dive right into questions. Uh, Maybe to begin with, you can talk about the evolving finance function, like how the function itself is evolving and what that means in the larger context of how to think about tooling for the finance function. I know, Apurva, you had some thoughts. Maybe you can go with you first.
Sure. Thank you. Um, the finance function, I think historically, it's always had a steward and a strategist component to it. And when I say steward, I think of job zero for the CFO and the finance function is to make sure the recording and reporting is accurate and timely. You keep the company legal, you're compliant, you're safeguarding assets, you're mitigating risk, creating controls, right? That has to be done. And if a CFO is not doing that well, it doesn't matter how well they're with a strategist, they won't have a job for too long, right? So historically, that's always been table stakes, right? Then the strategist part is where a CFO, he or she, can really start to make a bigger difference in the organization as well, where you're making decisions around allocating capital, resource allocation, business model evolution, competitive differentiation, M&A funding. But that is obviously an important part of the role as well. And I think what's also starting to evolve in organizations is we're starting to see this proliferation of data, right? And data across multiple departments and sometimes in silos. And the finance head has often looked at by the CEO and said, "Okay, you're always the voice of record when it comes to data. You tell me what's correct, right? You need to tell me what number's right when the production team says something and the finance team says something and the marketing team says something." So the CFO and the finance function also has to now become more of a data, not truly a data scientist, but manage data, make sure there's an efficient data strategy within the organization, whether it's within finance running it or others. But kind of a data um, element to his or her role is important. And then also, we're now starting to see the proliferation of AI, and how does AI help make the organization more productive, right? And we've seen startups, people say AI can make a entity that has 30 people as efficient as it would have had 40 people if you're using some of these tools, right? And how does a finance head help create that element of efficiency in the organization as well, right? So I think those elements are important parts of where finance is evolving, and how you think about tools and finance needs starts to fit into where we are in that evolution. And then one last point in terms of finance maturity is, I think of it as a stair step, and this also is important in terms of where you optimize and prioritize your tools. But step one is, hey, you just have data, and you providing data to the organization because you're accounting, you are recording data. Step two is, hey, you have business acumen, you have analytics, you have insights, you are asked to sit at the table. So you're not just giving data, now you're being asked to sit at the table. And step three is, you've really shown understanding of the business model, business acumen, and you're bringing people to the table, right? And depending on where you are on that maturity level, has a big impact on where do I prioritize what kind of tools that we need to invest in and where we're at for the organization. So I think that's an important part to set context for this overall conversation in my mind.
Awesome. Emily, I know you had some thoughts on this topic as well. Do you want to go next?
I do, yeah. Just to add on to what Apurva said, I think of it as several pillars within the organization, and I think it's important that we recognize the transition that finance has made from spreadsheets and auditing and numbers to decision making, storytelling, and really positioning the health of the organization and how we do that. So in my mind, it's how do you organize current data? How do you plan for the future? How are we monitoring and auditing? How are we controlling risk? And then finally, how are we telling a story? Whether it's about the past, the present, or the future, and what tools we need to do that efficiently and accurately.
Awesome. Rahul, so with that context in mind, uh, how do you kind of think of making justifying the return on investment on expenditure on finance tooling, and especially in this environment when there's everybody's trying to save costs, and finance is in charge of controlling the expenditure for every other department as well, which are more revenue generating departments. How do you justify or calculate the return on your investment on finance tooling with this context in mind?
Yeah, no, great question. First of all, thanks for giving the opportunity to speak in this webinar. And just to add to the point on the evolving the CFO, before I come to your question, is that I think the CFO role has been evolved significantly, in last couple of years, especially. And given the market condition that we are in right now, I think bringing new capital, allocating the capital into the right resources to get the highest return on the capital become extremely important, right? Like right now, the cash is the most expensive commodity that we have right now in the company. So using that cash wisely and allocating properly to bring vision of the founders on the reality is very important. To answer your question specifically on the return on investment, the tools. So we feel like I feel like I think these tools can bring significant efficiencies in the company, in the department, right? And every time there's efficiency, it's a dollar to bottom line. So I think yeah, there is a cost to this tool for sure, but the amount of the time, the amount of efficiency you bring to the table is significant. And the one way to measure the return on investment is just looking at the saving in the time, right? And in the company, especially in the SaaS company, the startup world, speed is very important, right? Getting things done on time is very important. So if these tools can help expedite your process, accelerate your time to close, accelerate your time to perform, if those things are impacted by the tools, then that's the return you're looking for. So to me, is all about efficiency and accelerating time to complete. If those two things makes a difference within using the tool, then I would go for it. So I would say that's how I measure the return on the investment on the tool side.
Got it. Anybody else wants to pitch in on that?
Yeah, the only thing I was going to add is how critical it is to be able to make real time decisions and to have that information at your fingertips. And the longer we're waiting for someone to analyze a spreadsheet and get the data to the people who need to make decisions quickly. I know finance isn't necessarily revenue generating historically, but we can impact revenue and we can mitigate loss. And so I think that those points are really important in terms of having the data at your fingertips when you need it to make real time decisions.
So, just adding to that, sometimes maybe you figure that a tool is too expensive, or you're able to get whatever you need done for much cheaper, just using your existing manual processes. So, how do you sort of, um, you know, do the math on like figuring out if it's actually worth it to get a tool?
Well, I would say like there's an opportunity cost, right, of continuing to do something that's manual and working, but we have sacrificed other things that may lead to, as Emily said, more readily available um, data to make faster decisions, right? And so I would try to understand what are we sacrificing, and what does that opportunity cost, right? And to the way I looked at it earlier, that may be why we're still in the just providing data phase. And to really make an impact in the organization, we have to be able to show business acumen and be more empowered. And we maybe can't be empowered because we've chosen not to make investments that allow us to make faster decisions, right? And then we will always be kind of in that early stage of maturity, and not really providing the impact that we could. So I think understanding the opportunity cost, and hopefully there's some hard opportunities, right? So it's revenue. There's oftentimes soft costs. It's savings of time, but perhaps a combination of both that you're able to assess by sacrificing that, moving from that manual process.
Got it. Awesome. And that brings me to my next question, which is more about other stakeholders involved in a company when making a decision, because it's, even if it's a tool that serves the finance function, oftentimes there are, sometimes the VP of sales or the CRO or the CEO or the head of product, depending upon what tooling you are looking for, other people get involved. So what does that conversation look like, and how do you kind of convince them that, hey, this makes sense and this is why we should be investing in this tooling?
I was going to say, I think most of the tools today, if finance is sitting as a collaborative partner across the entire organization, most of the tools that finance is going to invest in have a component that's going to benefit each member of the team. And so everyone being a business partner across the organization would be the first step in collaboration. And then the value add that this information or data or tool is going to bring, whether it's to the end user or whether it's internally to the entire organization, is an important part of the evaluation.
Yeah, and then honestly, as a finance person who's ultimately making some of the budget decisions, I actually want to move that sponsorship from finance to sales. It's easier to get that tool
Mhm.
approved if the salesperson is saying, "Yeah, this is going to help me get more revenue," right? Or the customer success person says, "Yeah, we will implement faster." Yeah, I think it's important that you get them to co-sponsor meaningful size investments in tools that are not just then characterized as HR or finance, which sometimes get sacrificed in the name of trade-offs.
Yeah, and just to add to that, like I think it's very important to also understand kind of companies' KPIs overall and how these expenses are contributing towards that KPI. Then I feel like every tool that finance team use, or most of the tool we are using, it has some component, some contribution to achieve the overall company's KPIs. And understanding kind of the broader picture is very important when we discuss with the different stakeholders.
Rahul, could you give me an example of that? That's a great point you make. Would love to get bring that to reality. Like example of a KPI that's across the company coming in from a finance tool. Let's take billing for example. Like if you talk about billing, what KPIs is it moving for other functions or the company overall?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think for billing standpoint, like if you have better tooling on the billing side, the number one, it can accurately bill to the customers. It can timely bill to the customer that can bring the collection much sooner, right? And these days, cash is a king, right? And bringing collection, even impacting by few days, can be huge impact to the company overall. And that efficiency in the working capital on the liquidity side can help invest in other business, other avenues, other departments, right? So I think billing tool can significantly impact on the collections, and that can turn into investment in different department can be helpful. The other thing is like budgeting and forecasting tool, right? Like having the accurate budgeting and forecasting and updating that on the timely fashion, timely manner, can significant impact the decision making for the company overall, right? Because if you have better data to play with, better data to look at, analyze, I think company can make decisions more timely and accurately. That can impact all departments across the company.
Makes sense. And we spoke about couple of different tools here. We spoke about billing, we spoke about budgeting, forecasting. Uh, there's of course a breadth of tools that the finance function could use. So how do you think about, hey, should we get one tool for each purpose? Should we get integrated tooling that serves multiple purposes? Like, what are the pros and cons of, let's say, having one tool doing a lot of things versus specific tools for each different purpose that finance is using? Let's say billing, collections, analytics, budgeting, forecasting.
Accounting,
Uh, Sorry?
recognition, revenue
Exactly.
recognition.
Accounting, RevRec. How do you think of, should it be one tool? Should it be multiple tools? What are the pros and cons?
Well, so I would again start with an understanding of, well, one, there's a reality, right? There's constraints. So, what is my constraint in terms of the budget I have, and am I better off buying two tools or one tool that does something really deep, right? And then again, from that perspective, I want to understand, where am I in my maturity level? If I'm still struggling with accuracy of my uh, numbers or timeliness of my numbers, I'm not going to invest in high end AI tools um, if I'm still struggling with getting accurate, you know, reporting to my stakeholders, right? And so I would be looking to automate some of those processes where I maybe have had long manual issues or accuracy issues, but understanding where I'm at. But I think the reality is, a finance department, generally, unless you're in a certain size company, you are not going to be able to get tools in every area that you might want, right? So we are going to make a trade-off from a headcount tool versus a cash flow tool versus a advanced analytics tool. Um, and I'm probably going to pick one that I think is going to drive me to the next stage of my impact, um, because I don't think the tool is going to be deep enough in all areas that I might have a need. So I'm probably going to pick on where I feel I have the biggest need that pulls me forward, and focus on that tool versus something that touches surface level on six things, right? But not deep enough in any one area where I have problems.
Yeah, I would focus on the maturity piece, and then the growth rate and your need to have versus nice to have, and then your all in one versus best of breed. And what do you need? What does your team need? And what's going to really take the organization to the next level? But I think that maturity piece is critical. And if you don't have the foundation and the basics in consistency of data, then the next level of tools are not necessarily gonna elevate the function.
Yeah, and just to add to that, like I think other thing important for me is like personally is like any tool we add, whether one tool function like multiple things, multiple tool doing one thing. I feel the most important thing for me is scalability. That it has to be scalable, right? So whatever tool we can bring to the table in the process, if it's not scalable, then it has no use in the long term. So even though we are the small startup these days, but the growth and the maturity will come much, much sooner than we're expecting. So whatever we are building today, bringing new tools, it has to be scalable with the time. And if that is the thing, then for me it's okay to have multiple tools as well as scalable.
Makes sense. And we touched a little bit on data. I want to dig a little deeper there. Like, when thinking of tooling for finance, how do you kind of think of data security, privacy, compliance? Like, how important is that? When is it important? When is it not important? Because that is one factor that kind of comes up very often when people think of getting tooling. So, any thoughts on data, data security, data privacy, compliance?
Well, I mean, I'm working with digital healthcare companies, so HIPAA and PHI, it's obviously very important, and financial data fits under some of those governing issues as well. So security has to be very uh, important and very confident and flawless in an industry like healthcare, right? So we can't sacrifice on security and privacy when it comes to an industry like healthcare.
Yeah, I'm also,
Yeah, I can't think of an
I'm also
industry
working
where it's not.
at the company where we are providing software to the 911 industry. So, regulation compliance is very important for us as well. If you ask me what's the one thing that keep me up at the night, and I would say data security, because that can hurt the company significantly. If there's any financial loss, we can fulfill that. That's okay, but the data breach, data security loss is very hard to to fill. So to me, that's extremely important.
Emily, what about you? You're not working in healthcare, so is it as relevant in meeting recordings?
It is because we have healthcare companies who are recording meetings, and our clients have a variety of use cases, and really, um, data is everywhere. So, regardless of what compliance you're adhering to, what risk you're trying to mitigate, I can't think of a scenario where data security and compliance wouldn't be at the forefront of decision making.
Got it. To touch a little on, Apurva, what you mentioned like very early on in the call, about how finance is evolving. You mentioned that like, in the recent past, like the amount of data has grown a lot, and there are all these silos of data within the company. So, uh, what are the sorts of challenges you have seen with siloed data, and how have you sort of try to solve these problems in the past in your experience?
Yeah, so I think so of course some of the challenges are data integrity, right? So what happens in some organizations I've seen is we have silo. Finance has revenue as a number that we've got in our system based on what we invoiced. A engineering team has calculated revenue based on, well, they have, or a production team, they have volume, they have a unit price, they're saying that's revenue, but there are sometimes discounts and other things that are not, that are in the invoice. So data integrity, you have multiple groups throwing out numbers that are for the same metric, and the organization doesn't understand which one is the correct number, and you have a meeting and somebody says that's the value, and somebody else says no, that's not, and then the meeting kind of grounds to a halt and you can't get anything done productively, right? So there's this
Mhm.
data governance and data integrity that you have to start with some data governance principles and data integrity principles, and then try to make that organizationally wide, right? And it's not necessarily the easiest thing to do, but I think there's this ongoing um, initiatives around most companies around what is our data governance structure and stance, and then try to get buy-in across the organization. Now, who owns that? Sometimes it's a CFO, sometimes there's a chief digital officer, sometimes it's in product. Regardless of who owns it, it's a collaborative thing that you got to get buy-in around what is the data governance, and make that a priority within the organization is how I would start.
Got it. In your experience, how have this for everyone, like Rahul, Emily, and Apurva, like how have you seen a company go from siloed data that has all these inconsistencies and problems to actually like a more streamlined sort of setup where different teams are agreeing with each other on the kinds of data that they are dealing with?
I would say I think in the in the early stage companies, mostly the things are siloed, like you said before. But I think as a company get mature, as as there's a willingness to spend more money on those things and bring things more to compliance level, then I think having its own team, or having a dedicated team or person handling the data and making sure the data is getting secured and kind of combining. I think so. I think having specific person for that might be helpful. And the one thing I would also add to that is, like, what I have seen is, I think overall the team awareness, overall awareness within the company for the data is very important, because there's always so much thing you can do by your own, or even having specific team, but it is all collaborative effort. So every single person in the company aware of the data security and what can go wrong, it's extremely important. So timely training, timely webinar, awareness, those things can play a big role.
Got
You know,
it.
I was going to say one of the downfalls of siloed data too is that we're not sharing it with other parts of the team, and we're not using it to make decisions. So when it's siloed and it's stuck within the function, and it's not presented or presented in a way that is productive for analysis, that's when we have a problem too. So it does start with the data governance and organization, but then that final step of sharing it with the appropriate teams for stronger decision making is usually a gap in telling that story.
And I think that's also part of the exciting part of what the tool sets are allowing us to envision. Right now, are we there? But I don't know, right? But I think of when we talk about data silos, I have this use case in my mind of, we have a contract database, right? All of our contracts. And if I'm the CFO and I ask the question, hey, which customers do I get a discount if I pay early, right? And I ask an AI tool or something that question, it goes through my contract list. It comes back with this 20 customers that I get a discount, right? And then I ask my cash flow management system, okay, model the scenario. Do I have the working capital to pay early? Do I have collections coming in? It's going to go and look at these 20 customers and say, um, yeah, the average payment that we've had for these is this. If we do this discount or we pay it earlier, we put that into the model. Here's the collections we're going to come in. And then it can come back and say, yeah, we can afford to do this real time, right? And it's connecting data from a contract management system that maybe finance doesn't own. It's connecting from your cash flow system, from your general ledger system, and it's giving a real time decision uh, through combining data from multiple sources. And that's also one of the areas I would be looking into investing is connecting these data silos, right? So some of it is insights, but is what are the tools that are connecting them, and are they the tool itself, or there other big data types of things that connect the different silos? But how do you connect the data and start answering the question why with some of these advanced analytical tools or AI tools, and make more real time decisions is an exciting part of the future for a finance head.
Awesome. I know we're almost coming on time, so just a couple of closing questions. We've spoken a lot about how to think of choosing a finance tool. I want to touch upon implementation a little bit. Like, let's say you've chosen a tool. How do you get the most out of it? Like, how do you make sure you're using it properly, your teams are well trained, and you are getting the most bang for your buck? Any thoughts on implementation?
No, I was just going to quickly say that's a critical piece in determining and choosing your tech stack is days to implement, days to adopt, days to ROI, and so hopefully that's all identified up front before you make a purchasing decision, and you've got buy-in from the team and usability across multiple functions.
Yeah, totally agree. I mean, I would say like something can go wrong is the implementation. If it's poorly done, then you can pay the price for that for a long time. It's very hard to fix things afterwards. You get consistently error, you get consistency, inefficiency in the using the tool. So implementing properly, correctly, rightly, it's extremely important.
Cool. Awesome. Just last question from my side. Any closing recommendations on companies, especially in this environment, on choosing their finance stack apart from what you've already discussed? Any closing thoughts?
I think from I think that it touches on all the points we've talked about today. So one is, what is your maturity level? Two, what's your rate of scaling? What are your requirements and your basic needs, and can it grow with you? How does security play into it? And then time to implement, and what's the scope of the project? So there's a lot of work to be done up front because many times implementation is so critical, and it's not easy to change tools down the road. So make sure you're making an informed decision up front and working through that as a team.
Yeah, and I would add, like, we hear this phrase, we want to be a data driven organization, and you often hear about, product decisions and sales decisions and digital marketing decisions about being data driven. But I think the finance team needs to think about being data driven beyond just the data that's in my general ledger, right? It's like, how am I using that data? How am I tying it to other data in the organization and creating insights, whether it be about headcount or whether it be about cash flow or whether it be about volumes. Um, but data driven, really embracing it, but embracing it beyond just the general ledger data is something finance needs to embrace.
Yeah, from my perspective, I think I would say that any tool you choose to implement, I would say think longer term. Don't try to fix a problem for next 6 to 12 months. Think about like what can help you next 3, 4, 5 years. And the second thing is like how it can help your team and across the team, across the departments. Bringing efficiency in the team. If it's something that is great for finance team, but it can put a lot of burden on other teams, then it's not right. So think it from all the team perspective, how it can help across the board.
So, just adding to that, Rahul, you mentioned that making sure that a tool is scalable and it works well in the long term. You've stressed on this like multiple times. Like, is there any specific reason why like, where you've seen something that you've maybe taken some time to implement and that didn't scale? And can you give an
Yeah,
example
absolutely.
of?
I have seen multiple times, in my life. So many times the companies, because of the budget constraint, because of the resources constraint, they implement a tool which looks amazing, in the short run. It's easy to implement, looks okay. It can fulfill all the requirement for the company at that point of time. But at the company scale, right, they outgrown those things pretty quickly. And when that happens, to kind of rip off that tool and implement the new tools is even more time consuming, because at that scale, at that level, you have high volume of the transaction, right? So at that point, implementing something new is like adds more cost. So to do things at the right time, at the right stage of the company is very important, because you won't get much time to kind of fix things as you're growing, as you're scaling, because you have so many the challenges with the businesses. So I have seen this movie go wrong many times. So I'll definitely stress on that and make sure that teams select the right tool that can help them for next 2, 3, 4 years. And listen, like when the company is growing, and especially the tech companies, the SaaS world, there are so many things will come with that. So many different challenges. So, and this tool is supposed to help those challenges. So selecting the right tool is important. That can help in the long run.
Awesome. We made it just in time. Thank you so much for all your time. Really appreciate the insights. I'm sure our audience will take a lot from this conversation.